The mafia boss was one signature away from losing everything. His money, his empire, his freedom, even his life were all buried inside a perfect-looking business deal. The lawyers smiled. The CEO lied. The room waited for the ink to dry. Then, a trembling woman with crooked glasses and a red folder smashed through the doors and revealed the truth. The entire acquisition was a federal trap designed by his deadliest enemies.
All right, pull up a chair with me and let us hit pause right here at the opening scene. Picture Dominic Rossi, the absolute king of narcissism,
holding a pen over a contract worth $4.2 billion. This is his golden ticket to wash his family's blood-stained legacy clean. The boardroom is dead silent, heavy enough to choke on. Then, bang, the doors fly open. In bursts this terrified, breathless accountant clutching a red folder, begging him not to sign. Now, you would expect a mob boss to snap, right? But what Dominic does next paralyzes a room full of hardened killers, and here is the simplest life lesson you can learn today. True power is not about making noise. The most dangerous weapon a predator has is pure, calculated unpredictability. Before we get to the blood and guts, we have to talk about Penelope Hayes. In the ruthless shark tank of high-end corporate finance, she survived by becoming completely invisible. The senior partners treated her like a ghost, freezing her out of client dinners and dumping mountains of raw data on her desk just to break her spirit. But here is the fatal flaw of arrogant people. When you force someone into isolation, you accidentally give them a superpower hypervigilance. Because no one ever bothered to look at Penelope, they had zero clue how deeply she was analyzing them. It is a harsh truth, but sometimes the people society shoves into the darkest corners are the only ones left with the vision to see exactly what is hiding in the shadows. Penelope did not just crunch numbers, she actually felt them. She could trace dirty money through offshore accounts and dummy corporations like a bloodhound tracking a scent. Picture this. It is a miserable Tuesday night, almost midnight, and the rain is just hammering the glass outside her tiny cubicle. The entire floor is pitch black except for her screen. She is running one last paranoid sweep on this $4.2 billion buyout by Aegis Capital. Everyone thinks Aegis is just a corporate giant, but underneath, they are a brutal criminal syndicate. Her quiet little obsession with getting the math right is about to slam her headfirst into the mob. It teaches you that sometimes just doing your job too well is what paints a target on your back. Stick with me here, because this is where the irony gets so thick you could cut it with a knife. Aegis Capital was nothing but a slick, socially acceptable mask for the Rossi crime family. Dominic Rossi inherited his father's bloody empire at 30 and spent 5 brutal years laundering his own name. This Meridian shipping deal was his holy grail. If he owned those global shipping lanes, the feds could never touch him again. He'd finally be a ghost. And right at that exact moment, miles away, an exhausted Penelope rubs her tired eyes and clicks on a hidden holding account. Without even realizing it, this quiet accountant just wandered into the tiger cage. The lesson here? Our biggest turning points usually happen on the most mundane nights of our lives. You know how the brain naturally hunts for patterns? Well, Penelope's mind was a finely tuned machine, and it just hit a speed bump. It started as a tiny, almost invisible glitch in a depreciation schedule for some cargo ships in Genoa. Anyone else would have shrugged it off as a typo. Penelope could not let it go. She started cross-referencing the shipping manifests with tax filings, whispering to the empty room that these boats definitely were not carrying fabric. Digging past the firewalls her boss set up, she hit the raw data. Over the next 3 hours, you can practically see the panic setting in as she uncovers a truth so dark it would make a seasoned detective sick. Remember, the smallest thread can unravel the most carefully woven lie. It turns out Meridian Logistics was already dead, just a financial zombie propped up by billions in hidden debt. And here is the absolute kicker. That debt was entirely owned by the Moretti family, the Rossi Ziti's most bloodthirsty Ziti rivals over in Chicago. It was a masterpiece of corporate sabotage. If Dominic Rossi puts his name on that paper, he instantly inherits $2 billion in cartel debt and a one-way ticket to the federal prison for racketeering. The second the ink dries, the trap closes. Rossi rots in age, and his rivals eat his empire. Penelope just stares in pure horror at the printer spitting out this lethal death warrant. It proves that revenge is not always exacted with a gun. Sometimes it is hidden in the fine print. Watch Penelope's face in this scene, guys. She is clutching 30 pages of catastrophic proof, her heart practically beating out of her chest. This is a woman who spends weekends baking and watching nature documentaries, out of her depth in a mob war. But at 8 in the morning, she marches right into the office of her boss,
Roland Sterling. Roland is a greedy, hollow shell of a man who sweats expensive gin and arrogance. She slams the red folder onto his desk and begs him to stop the deal. And what does Roland do?
He does not even glance at the paperwork. He just gives her this cold, sneering look, completely erasing her value. The hard truth is, pride will always blind a foolish man to the fire burning right outside his door. Roland was totally blind to the bloodbath headed their way because all he could see was his $50 million commission. Basic survival instinct just vanish. Penelope is practically pleading with him, explaining the routing numbers and proving this deal is a massive Trojan horse. She spells it out clearly. When Dominic Rossi finds out they sold him a bomb, he is going to have them killed. But Roland just slowly stands up, buttons his tailored jacket, and speaks to her like she is a child. He coldly reminds her she is just a junior analyst who does not understand how billionaires play the game. Sometimes, trying to save a person who refuses to listen, the quickest way to end up going down with their ship. You and I have probably both had bosses we hated, but Roland takes the cake. He delivers the final blow, ordering her to delete the files and keep her mouth shut, or she is fired. Then he just brushes right past her. Penelope is frozen, trapped in that terrifying fight or flight paralysis. She has to make a choice right now. She can shrink back into her safe little bubble and wait to be collateral damage, or she can break every rule she has ever lived by. And man, the moment she grabs that folder is cinematic gold. Her desperate sprint toward the executive elevator is pure, terrifying adrenaline. Here is the lesson we all need to hear. Doing the right thing is rarely comfortable, and sometimes it requires absolute, reckless defiance. Meanwhile, up on the 50th floor, the architecture itself is built to make you feel tiny. At the head of this massive black marble sits Dominic Rossi. He does not look like a movie monster. He has these sharp, aristocratic features and cold, dark eyes, wearing a charcoal suit that screams untouchable power. But it is not his expensive clothes that choke the air out of the room. It is that terrifying, quiet energy of a guy who knows he owns everyone breathing near him. He sits perfectly still, calm as a statue, with the impossibly slow, just waiting to sink his teeth. The most dangerous threats in this life rarely roar at you. They usually sit in dead silence and smile. Standing right behind Dominic is Leo Cavallo, his loyal underboss. If Dominic is the scalpel, Leo is the sledgehammer, sporting a nasty scar through his eyebrow just so no one forgets where they came from. Across that cold marble table sits Richard Croft, the CEO of Meridian, surrounded by a bunch of lawyers who are sweating through their shirts. Croft is trying his hardest to act tough, but his body language is screaming in panic.
You can see his hands literally shaking.
He croaks out the funds are secured, his voice cracking from the unbelievable tension in his throat. Death to close this deal day. The takeaway here?
You can wear the nicest suit in the world, but your fear will always betray you. Let us look closer at this together, because this is where Dominic's genius kicks in. He locks his dead eyes onto Croft and just stares. When you grow up in the underworld, you learn to read every tiny twitch of human man. Dominic senses something off in the way. Croft is shifting in his chair. The massive discounts they offered at the last second just did not make business sense. Dominic speaks in this low, terrifying rumble that makes you want to apologize just for breathing. Croft panics, babbling about how the audit from Sterling and Price is completely spotless. Then Leo leans in and whispers in Sicilian that something feels wrong. It just shows that no matter how much money is on the table, you should never ignore your gut instinct. Without blinking, Dominic whispers back in Sicilian, justifying the enormous risks. He needs these shipping ports to go totally legitimate. Testified, but the old mob bosses will force his crew into pushing street drugs. He actually thinks he is the good guy here. He determined to break his father's violent curse. It is the classic tragic delusion, thinking you can just wash away a lifetime of sins with a big enough paycheck. As Dominic slowly pulls out his incredibly expensive pen, the camera cuts to the lobby. Penelope is having a complete meltdown, fighting past the building security guards. Her lungs are burning as she flashes her badge, rushing to the elevators. In the end, fate always finds a way to force a collision between two opposite worlds. Today, you and I are going to hit pause and unpack a textbook case of psychological subjugation. Picture Penelope Hayes, an exhausted accountant, riding an elevator up 50 floors. She is gasping for air, clutching a red folder like a shield. She is muttering about health insurance, entirely missing the fact that she is stepping into a monster's den. It is funny at first, until the tragic reality sets in. Her brain is so warped by corporate stress that she fears unemployment more than actual death. It teaches you a brutal truth about life. When the elevator doors and you are staring down armed men, your job title means absolutely nothing. The prey has officially arrived at the predator's door. Look at these guards outside the boardroom. They aren't just muscle. They are the physical extension of a kingpin's absolute, terrifying control. Their hands hover near concealed weapons, silently promising violence. And then there is Penelope, hyperventilating, trying to push past them because of an emergency with the Meridian acquisition. Her voice is cracking, her system completely flooded with panic. The guards just cross their arms, totally amused by this frazzled accountant stepping into their lethal world. They tell her to walk away. She actually thinks her corporate crisis matters Myers here. Here, it just goes to show you that delusion might feel like a warm blanket, but it will never stop a bullet. She stands there staring at those heavy oak or doors, doing the math. If Dominic Rossi signs that contract, he walks straight into a federal snare. The guards give her one last warning before the bigger guy grabs her arm, squeezing hard enough to force instant compliance. But watch this, guys. Here is a simple, meaningful life lesson. Pure terror will either freeze you in your tracks, or it will make you do the absolute unthinkable. Penelope has spent her entire existence being shoved aside by people stronger than her. Not today. Driven by blinding adrenaline, she takes that heavy red folder and violently smashes it right into the guard's face. You can hear the cartilage shatter. The psychological dam just burst open. Before the second guard even touches his gun, Penelope throws her entire body weight forward. She breaches those huge mahogany doors, and they bang open, sounding exactly like a gunshot. The whole room just freezes.
And there he is.
Dominic Rossi.
His pen is hovering a single millimeter over the signature line, and the man doesn't even flinch. Well,
maybe a slow blink, but nothing else. His nervous system is so deadened it is terrifying. He slowly lifts those dead, dark eyes. Penelope is standing there, soaked, chest heaving, gripping a smashed red folder. Everyone else is panicking, but Dominic, he just watches. It is a chilling reminder of how the world works. True power never reacts, it just quietly observes. You and I really need to pause and look at what happens next. The rival executive, Richard Croft, turns completely pale. Penelope screams at Dominic, begging him not to sign the $4.2 billion deal. Instantly, 4 security guys draw silenced pistols, aiming right at her heart. The guards from the hall grab her shoulders, practically begging for the order to snap her neck. And Penelope, she just squeezes her eyes shut. She delivered her warning, and she is fully prepared to die for it. It breaks your heart to see it.
It is a heartbreaking to face, but the moment you completely surrender, someone else will gladly step in and claim it. Is the exact predator needs.
She is just standing there, waiting for the bullet, fully convinced she is about to bleed out on some ridiculously expensive rug. But instead of a gunshot, a voice cuts through the room. It is not loud. It is this quiet, terrifying whisper of a man who literally holds life and death in his hands. Dominic drops his pen on the marble table with a click that sounds like a judge's gavel. He stands up, all 6 feet 3 inches of him, completely ignoring the armed men. His dark eyes are locked onto Penelope. He whispers for them to step back, and they drop her like she is radioactive. It proves a harsh truth about human nature. You can always spot the person who truly runs the room, because they are the only one who never has to shout. Dominic tells Croft to shut up without even glancing in his direction. It is absolutely chilling. His pitch-black eyes are entirely fixed on Penelope, scanning her from her ruined shoes up to her shaking hands. He starts circling that massive marble table with the slow, deliberate grace of a tiger cornering its meal. She can feel his physical presence crushing her before he even gets close. He stops right in front of her, smelling like bergamot, rain, and pure danger. He asks who she is, his voice a smooth, rumbling threat. She swallows her panic and stammers out that she is a forensic auditor. Sometimes, the most painful lesson we have to learn is that telling the truth to the wrong person is the most dangerous thing you can do. Dominic mentions that her boss just promised the deal was clean. And here, Penelope makes a fatal mistake. Running on pure adrenaline, she snaps, calling her boss a lazy fraud who doesn't read past the cover page.
I feel the air gets sucked out of the room. Insulting my boss's advisor to his face. That is suicide.
The guards tense up, ready to end her. But then, the craziest thing happens. Dominic actually smiles. It is this tiny, lethal smirk that completely changes his face. He asks if she is absolutely sure. Penelope, finding comfort in the one thing she knows, her numbers confirms it. It is a wild irony of life. Pure competence is a fantastic shield, but in the wrong room, it just makes you incredibly valuable to the monsters. She is still terrified, but the cold, hard numbers give her something to hold on to. She actually shoves that ruined red folder right into his chest. Dominic calmly takes it from her shaking hands. She tells him to flip to page 12 for the freighter schedules and page 14 for the hidden debt. For 30 agonizing seconds, the only sound is the rain smashing against the glass. We are watching Penelope watch him. She sees the exact millisecond his ruthless mind puts boggled together. She sees the betrayal hit him, followed instantly by the chilling promise of extreme violence. It is a terrifying paradox. The truth will absolutely set you free, but delivering that truth to a dangerous man will tether you to him for the rest of your life. Stick with me, because this is where the dynamic completely flips. A shadow so profoundly dark crosses his face that Penelope actually stumbles backward. The Kingpin's ego just took a hit, and the room's temperature drops to freezing. He quietly closes the folder. Croft is practically vibrating with sheer panic, his eyes darting toward the doors, like full meltdown mode. Dominic looks at his enforcer, his voice totally empty of human emotion, and then tells him to lock the doors. That heavy deadbolt sliding into place sounds exactly like a coffin slamming shut. The rival lawyers try to run, but the guards violently shove them. It is a sobering reminder that when the heavy doors finally lock, all your money means absolutely zero.
He picks up that massive $4 billion contract and just stares at Croft, who is literally hyperventilating now. Dominic softly mentions the $2 billion in cartel debt hidden inside.
Set up perfectly for a federal prosecutor to find. Croft starts shrieking, crying, trying to blame Penelope for faking the math. But look at Dominic. He doesn't yell. He just slowly tears that giant stack of contracts in half, and then in half again. Hadid, the shredded paper falls like snow on the black marble. Without ever breaking eye contact with the sobbing CEO, he tells his men to take Croft's team down to the soundproof basement. It just perfectly illustrates that the loudest guy in the room is usually the weakest, while the choir test guy decides who lives. You and I are going to look at this together and decide if she really won. Croft is screaming for mercy while massive thugs drag him out, completely ignoring his thrashing. In 5 seconds, the room is empty except for Dominic, his guards, and Penelope. Her adrenaline completely bottoms out. Her knees turn to water. The bitterest part? She just saved a mafia boss and sentenced a group of men to a torture basement. Panicking, she turns to the door, stammering about going back her cabal like, "What? Nothing happened." But Dominic's low voice stops her cold. It is the ultimate tragedy of your situation. You simply cannot step into the absolute dark, change all the rules, and still expect to walk safely back into the light. She is his now. Let us pause with the movie right here. He closes the gap until he is standing practically on top of her. Penelope has to crane her neck just to find his dark, pitch-black eyes. He reaches out, and she flinches hard, but his massive hand just gently adjusts her crooked glasses, his thumb grazing her wet cheek. It is a calculated move to short-circuit her nervous system, laying the absolute foundation for a trauma bond. He whispers that she just saved his life, his freedom, and his entire empire. His gaze drops to her mouth. He asks if she honestly thinks he would ever let go back to a boring cubicle. Her brain melts under the pressure. She mumbles something pathetic about having a cat to feed. The lesson here? When a shark corners you, mentioning your goldfish will not save you. You and I are going to unpack this together. That terrifying smile creeps back onto his lips. He coldly states her boss was perfectly fine, letting him walk into a federal trap, a mistake that will be punished. But she risked her neck for a stranger. He leans close, his breath hitting her ear, triggering massive panic. He whispers that she belongs to him now. Her brain completely shuts down. She stares up at the mob boss, seeing nothing but absolute certainty in his dark eyes. She desperately stammers a pathetic excuse about her apartment lease. The brutal lesson is this: the strongest cages are rarely made of iron bars. They are built the exact second we surrender our free will to the monsters standing right in front of us. Pause the film right here and appreciate the bitter irony. We are watching Penelope, an ordinary accountant, trying to enforce normal boundaries against an absolute apex predator. She tries to use logic, claiming she is an independent woman. Dominic responds with the ultimate intimidation tactic. He uses his massive physical frame to block out her surroundings, systematically crushing her false sense of safety. He drops the heavy reality on her, revealing the $2 billion loss she just caused his crime syndicate. Notice how he weaponizes the raw truth to send her into pure shock. The blood drains from her face as her nervous system shuts down. The life lesson is harsh but true. Logic is completely useless when you are arguing with a force of nature that only respects raw power. Watch my see. You can see the exact moment the adrenaline leaves her body, dropping her into total vulnerability. Penelope goes from being an invisible civilian to a massive target. Before she can process the panic, the scene shifts. Leo walks into the room. Notice how completely dead his eyes are as he casually wipes blood off his expensive gold watch. This guy is a walking nightmare. Leo calmly reports that their captive finally broke, confirming a massive betrayal inside the accounting firm. It turns out her own boss, Roland, is the guy who sold them out. The web is closing in around her throat. It teaches us a grim lesson about trust. Sometimes the person smiling at you from the corner office is the exact same snake who threw you into the lion pit in the first place. It is painful watching her brain frantically put the pieces together. Roland then set her up, using her quiet personality as the perfect cover for his corporate fraud. Right next to her, Dominic is radiating that cold, terrifying rage you only see in high-level mob bosses. He starts barking out tactical orders, but then she does something completely insane. Driven by pure panic over her cat, Penelope actually reaches out and grabs her captor.
It is a desperate attempt to claw back some control over her life.
In any other movie, a crime boss would snap her wrist for that, but Dominic just freezes. He does not pull away. The left-ear hum, sometimes showing absolute, raw vulnerability, will stop a predator in his tracks faster than a loaded weapon ever could. Hit pause and look right at his eyes. He stares down at her hand on his arm, and you can see the exact second his brain switches gears. She is not just random collateral damage anymore. She just became his personal property. He casually orders his men to go rescue her cat, which is honestly a genius move to force her to rely on him. When one of his heavily armed thugs questions why they are bringing a pet into a gang war, Dominic shuts it down instantly. The temperature in the room drops below freezing. In this violent underworld, questioning the boss means you are asking for a death sentence. He glares at the guy, radiating pure dominance. Here is a simple truth to remember. True power never has to raise its voice to make the entire room hold its breath in absolute terror. The mob boss just drew an unbreakable line in the sand. She stays by his side, no exceptions. As his backs down, Dominic does something twisted. He takes off his heavy wool coat and wraps it around her shaking shoulders. To her, it feels like protection. But let us be real. This is a predator marking his territory. He is drowning her in his scent, isolating her from the real world. Add He grabs her arm, locking her in with an iron grip, and leads her down into a hidden underground bunker. Suddenly, an army of mercenaries with assault rifles steps out of the shadows. Skubs Pamarish. She's fully in the Mafia world now. The lesson here is chilling. Sometimes the very jacket keeping you warm is the exact same net designed to trap you forever. Listen to the sound design in this scene. You can hear her cheap office shoes squeaking on the cement, screaming civilian panic, while surrounded by military-grade killers. They march toward a line of massive bulletproof luxury cars. Dominic practically shoves her into the middle vehicle, sealing them inside. The heavy doors lock with a sickening click. Suddenly, she is tapped in a quiet leather-lined vault of bulletproof glass. It is a rolling prison. As the motorcade speeds out into brutal New York thunderstorm, Penelope just sits there, completely frozen by terror. She grips his oversized coat like it is a life raft. The hard lesson of fate is that survival often forces us to cling to the exact monster who threw us into the storm in the first place. Stick with me, because we need to appreciate the absolute whiplash she's feeling. Just a few hours ago, her biggest headache was a messy Now, she is locked in an armored tank with cartel enforcers. Dominic looks at her and sees her nervous system crashing. He pours a glass of ridiculously expensive scotch and hands it to her. It sounds like a suggestion, but it is an absolute order. She drinks it. The burning alcohol forces her brain to stop spiraling and reboot. It is a classic manipulation tactic. In moments of pure horror, your body will instinctively accept whatever medicine the person in charge hands you. The reality check here is scary. Trauma makes us incredibly easy to control, because when you are drowning, you will drink anything just to survive. It is agonizing watching her try to negotiate with a guy who holds all the cards. She starts demanding a timeline, desperately clinging to her boring, quiet life as if it still exists. She keeps talking about her routines, her apartment, her lack of importance. But Dominic just moves closer, invade videos with that terrifying magnetic pull only a true villain has. He reaches out and brushes wet hair off her face. It is an intimate, violating move. Voice drops down to a mesmerizing, low rumble as he practically performs surgery on her mind by cutting every tie she has to her old life. He breaks the illusion that she is ever going back. The tragic lesson here is that denial is the mind's favorite anesthetic, but it always wears off right when the blade hits the bone. He looks her dead in the eye and casually reclassifies as his personal property. He promises to keep her safe, but the hidden price tag is total submission. This right here is the exact moment the trauma of the Bambond takes root. The car pulls up to his penthouse, a massive glass fortress floating above the city. He uses a fingerprint scanner just to open his front door, proving his absolute paranoia. The whole place is designed to make you feel tiny. It is a sickening display of illicit wealth. Huge bulletproof windows show the raging storm outside, while the heated floors keep them perfectly warm inside. He is literally showing off his power to control the weather in her world. The lesson is simple. A golden cage is still a cage, no matter how warm the floor is. All this luxury means nothing to a woman whose brain is fried. Penelope is running on pure survival instinct. Dominic snaps orders at his armed guards, locking down the perimeter and preparing her room. To wash up and wait for him. Think about how twisted that is. It is exactly like a prison warden dictating an inmate's schedule. She is way too mentally drained to fight back, so she just goes completely numb. We watch her follow a guy with an assault rifle down a massive hallway covered in priceless art. She looks like a fragile ghost wandering through a billionaire's museum. The harsh lesson of survival is that sometimes shutting down and following orders is the only way to keep your heart beating until sunrise. It is heartbreaking to watch her stand under the boiling hot water in that massive marble shower. She is scrubbing her skin raw, which is a textbook reaction to extreme trauma. She is desperately trying to wash off the invisible dirt of the Mafia underworld, but we all know it will not work. In the quiet of the bathroom, her brain finally says the crazy part out loud. She, nobody accountant, just ruined an international crime ring. She steps out of the steam and finds a set of navy blue silk pajamas folded on the counter. And here is the terrifying part. They are tailored exactly to her size. The chilling truth about life is that true vulnerability is not being naked. It is realizing that the monster knows your exact measurements before you even arrive. Getting custom silk pajamas delivered at 2 a.m. proves one terrifying fact. This guy has been obsessively stalking her for a long time. The second she puts that silk on, she is subconsciously accepting his control. Ironically, the expense of his fabric makes her stand a little taller, like stripping away the boring office worker identity she used to hide behind. She walks out into the dim living room and finds him pacing. He has taken off his suit coat and is just wearing a tight shirt. All the corporate polish is gone, revealing the brutal, muscular build of a guy who has survived by violence. He is done pretending. The monster is finally unmasked. The lesson is clear. When the villain drops his disguise, you better pray you are not the only one left in the room. Watch how he looks at her as she walks in. He does not even try to hide it anymore. His eyes practically devour her, showing a dark, hungry obsession he has clearly been hiding for months. Nobody has ever looked at Penelope like this, and it completely ruins whatever courage she had left. She tries to act tough, crossing her arms and demanding logical answers. But Dominic smoothly ignores her tone, physically guiding her to sit down in a way that feels exactly like a police interrogation. He does not sugarcoat a single thing. He looks her dead in the eye and tells her that a squad of heavily armed hitmen just kicked down the door to her apartment. The bitter truth here is that sometimes the answers we angrily demand are the exact nightmares we are trying to escape. You and I need to pause the movie one last time. Yeah, because this is the exact second the trap permanently locks. He tells her that assassins were waiting inside her private bedroom. Then, before she can even scream, he instantly calms her down by telling her that her cat is totally safe and currently scratching up his head of security. The whiplash of relief completely destroys her emotional defenses. Penelope breaks down and sobs, the pure horror of how close she came to dying finally catching up to her. And who is there to catch her? The mob boss. He steps in to hold her. This is the darkest lesson of human psychology. When the absolute architect of your nightmare suddenly becomes your only safe space to cry, you are never ever going home again. Let's hit pause right here, guys, because what we are looking at is the absolute textbook definition of a trauma bond forming in real time. Dominic grabs Penelope by the wrists, right? It looks like he is keeping her safe, but he is actually applying just enough pressure to let her know he is the one in control. He forces her to look him dead in the eyes and promises to completely wipe out the Moretti family over the next 6 months. He is setting himself up as her god. Penelope, totally broken by years of feeling worthless, whispers that she is a nobody, just an accountant. But here is the bitter irony. A narcissist like him needs a shiny mirror. He wipes her tear and tells her she is extraordinary for staring down hitmen. He is building her up just to own her. Watch how smooth he is. This is the clinical part where he pumps up her worth, which is exactly how you groom someone. He points out that she saw the financial loopholes that 20 expensive corporate lawyers completely missed. When Penelope pushes back, using his first name to remind him she is not a toy, his eyes just lock onto her. He calls her an empire builder. It is such a brilliant, twisted move. He tosses a heavy platinum card onto the glass table, making her the new chief financial officer of Aegis Capital. He promises her a staff of 50 people and total freedom as long as she clears out his enemies. He is handing her the entire world, just to lock the door of a cage she will never want to escape. You and I should have to stop thinking about the math happening inside Penelope's head right now. She is staring at that platinum card, weighing the years of quiet, soul-crushing abuse from Roland Sterling against this sudden explosion of power. She is being offered a throne paid for in blood by a guy who is practically a walking red flag. And what does she do? She does not run. Her survival instinct flips a switch. She lifts her chin, her voice shaking just a little bit, and tells him she has used conditions. And Dominic, he flashes this devastating smile, looking exactly like a wolf, watching a rabbit walk right into its own snare. He tells her, the fire in the glass hearth is burning bright, but the real heat is coming as terrifying obsession with her. The guy is staring at her with the dark, heavy intensity of a starving man who just found the only meal that matters. Name your conditions, my queen, he repeats. He is using Italian endearments now, practically tying a rope around her with his words. And the irony is just brutal here. Penelope is sitting there in silk pajamas, locked deep inside a mafia fortress, actually believing this little piece of platinum gives her the upper hand. But for the first time in her, she stops making herself small. She forces her breathing to steady and lays out her first rule. She absolutely refuses to cook the books. If he wants to move dirty money, he has to keep it a million miles away from her clean corporate servers. She is drawing a line in the sand with a monster. She makes it crystal clear that she is not going to take the fall on federal racketeering charges for anybody. Dominic just leans back into the leather sofa, crossing his massive chest. He looks so relaxed, practically smirking, because he finds her illusion of control so incredibly entertaining. He agrees right on the spot. She gets the clean empire, he keeps the dirt. Then she drops her second condition, and you can see her getting addicted to the power. She demands the right to fire the lazy, privileged kids sitting in the finance department and build her own team of hungry, sharp analysts. She wants total hiring and firing control, completely off limits to him. And Dominic, his dark eyes just light up. He is dangerously amused by how fast she is taking over. She actually spins this demand for power as a survival tactic, telling him straight to his face that she needs the tools to keep him out of a federal cell. She is tying their fates together. Dominic drops his voice, stepping into her space to remind her who the real apex predator is. He drags his thumb right along her jawline, a calculated move that sends a visible shock straight down her spine. It is his way. See, you only have power because I let you. Her breath catches the second his finger brushes her lower lip. And then out of nowhere, she drops her third condition. She demands premium wet food every single day for her cat, Barnaby. The tension completely snaps, and a deep, genuine laugh rips out of this untouchable syndicate boss. It is honestly wild to hear the sound of real laughter bouncing off the walls of that cold penthouse. But before he can even process what she just made him feel, the heavy steel elevator doors slide open. His top enforcer, Leo, walks in looking absolutely murderous, and in his arms is Penelope's massive 20-pound orange tabby cat. He just stares at this boss. The cat bit one of the armed guards before dropping the animal onto the very expensive rug. Penelope gasps and hits her knees. The cat instantly runs to her, purring like a chainsaw, rubbing all over her arm. She buries her face in its fur, and it is so heartbreaking because you can see her desperately holding on to this one tiny piece of her old, safe life before the violence swallowed her whole. But that sweet domestic little moment shatters in about 2 seconds. Leo locks eyes with his boss, and all the warmth instantly drains out of Dominic's face. The charming guy is gone,
replaced by the cold, dead stare of a ruthless criminal leader. Leo is the bad news, as Roland Sterling slipped away before the extraction team could kick his door in. And the worst part?
They intercepted dark web chatter proving Sterling downloaded the entire master blueprint of Aegis Capital. Every single clean business, tax shelter, and blind trust Dominic spent 5 years building is sitting on one tiny hard drive, and right at this very moment, Sterling is trying to sell all of that incredibly sensitive data to their biggest rival, Lorenzo Moretti. Let's pause and look the absolute nightmare Penelope is calculating right now. The silence in that room is thick enough to choke on. If the Moretti family gets their hands on those clean financial blueprints, they can trigger federal audits, freeze his money, and destroy the legitimate empire in a matter of months. That would force Dominic right back into the bloody street wars he tried to escape. It is a total disaster. Dominic gets that scary, quiet tone in his voice and demands to know where the exchange is happening.
Leo looks furious, admitting they are totally in the dark.
Sterling is hiding behind a heavy encrypted Swiss escrow service and waiting for $15 million to clear before he hands over the location. They are completely paralyzed. Second that cash clears, the location gets sent. Where everything flips, and you'd have to banana beast wearing silk banajip, like she putting on a suit of armor. All that brilliant brain power her old boss used to crush is suddenly weaponized to protect the very mobster who kidnapped her. She steps right between these two lethal men and starts asking about the Swiss account. Leo tells her it is untraceable, but Penelope just shuts him down. She says nothing is totally hidden if you know the code. She practically roasts her old boss, explaining that Sterling is a creature of habit who is way too arrogant to ever change security keys. Without even blinking, she demands the fastest computer Dominic has in the building. Dominic does not even question her. He just to sleek black computer sitting on a glass desk across the room. Penelope practically sprints over there with this massive orange cat trotting right behind her like her own personal bodyguard. It is hilarious but also amazing. She drops into the chair, cracks her knuckles like she is about to go to war, and her hands just blur across the keyboard. She bypasses the standard system and right into a root command terminal. You have these two incredibly dangerous men standing dead silent behind her, watching the green code reflect off her glasses. She mutters that Sling's firewall is a complete joke, and right there you realize she is not scared of these guys anymore. She has found her power. Just look at how easily she turns her knowledge into a loaded gun. She casually mentions that she built a secret backdoor into Sterling's servers 3 years ago, just so she could work from home. Within 3 minutes, she completely breaks into the global banking system. She isolates the massive surge of digital money hitting the Swiss network, locking right onto the $15 million meant to destroy her new boss. Dominic asks if she can pull the plug on the transfer. Penelope looks back at him with this wicked, triumphant smile that proves she belongs in this world. Shinta tells him she is going to do something much worse. She is rerouting all of that cash directly into a flagged cartel account that Interpol is watching like a hawk. It is absolute poetry. Let's pause the movie right here. Picture this scene. Penelope just slammed the enter key and boom. The screen flashes a massive compliance hold at 99%. With one automated anti-money laundering trigger, she freezes $15 million of enemy cash. No guns, no blood. Leo is standing there, jaw basically on the floor, watching a quiet girl financially decimate their rivals. She swivels around, totally cold, and says Sterling is stranded. And Dominic, his eyes go completely black with this twisted, obsessive awe. He leans over, trapping her against the desk, and whispers that she is the deadliest weapon he owns. It is terrifying, but here is the real lesson. Sometimes the people who finally recognize your power are exact monsters you should be running away from. Fast forward to the next morning. Golden Manhattan sunlight is fighting through the storm clouds outside, but inside her massive guest room, it is dead silent. The kind of expensive, soundproof silence that messes with your head. Penelope sits up, shoving her messy hair out of her face, and the reality hits her like a freight train. She just crossed a line into the criminal underworld that she can uncross. It is a bitter irony we all face eventually when you finally stop making yourself small for people who ignore you. You might end up selling your soul to the villains who actually respect you. Suddenly, a sharp knock makes her jump. She pulls the blanket up like a shield, but in walks Clara, a sharp-eyed woman carrying armfuls of high-end clothes. Now watch this transformation sequence. They tell her she needs armor, not clothes. For 2 agonizing hours, Clara treats her like a canvas, pinning and measuring every inch. Penny spent her whole life hiding in cheaper, baggy clothes, a classic defense mechanism so nobody would notice her. But when she finally looks in the mirror, she gasps. She is locked into a custom midnight blue power suit that fits with terrifying mathematical perfection. Her messy hair is now completely sleek and controlled. This is not just a makeover montage. Guys, this is a total psychological rewrite. The lesson is honestly chilling. If you wear a mask of absolute power long to hide how scared you are, that mask eventually becomes your real face. There is no going back after this. Let us look at this piece by piece together. She steps into Lato's, looking less like a nervous accountant and way more like a lethal weapon. When she walks into the living area, Dominic is standing by the elevator in a black suit and a blood-red tie. The man literally freezes. He tracks every single sharp line of her new look, his eyes practically burning with the hunger of a narcissist staring at his own masterpiece. Penny catches her breath, mistaking her absolute terror for romantic desire. He tells her she is breathtaking, and it sounds more like a threat than a compliment. He offers his arm. She says she is ready, slipping her hand right into his trap. The harsh truth here? Sometimes the cage is so beautifully decorated, we lock the door ourselves. Hit play on the corporate arrival scene. This is not a business meeting. It is an organized military strike for pure psychological warfare. 3 heavy armored trucks roll up in a massive glass-fronted Skybird. Dominic steps out, and the crowded street practically that's like the Red Sea. But when Penny steps out next, guarded by guys with actual assault rifles, the whole block starts whispering. They ride the elevator to the 60th floor. Dominic kicks the boardroom doors open without even knocking. Inside are 20 of the richest, most obnoxious finance bros in the city, with that snake, Gregory Trent, sitting at the very head of the table. Here is the funny thing about power: it is totally fake. It only exists because we all agree to pretend it does until someone brings a bigger gun. Remember Trent? He is the smug jerk who laughed at 10 months ago over some boring compliance paperwork. Well, the entire room drops into dead silence the second Dominic walks in. He says good morning with a voice so cold it could freeze water, forcing Trent to scramble out of the big chair. But watch what Dominic does here. He does not sit down. He pulls out the heavy leather chair and points to it for Penny. She takes a huge breath, wears that new suit-like armor, and sits at the head of the table. Then Dominic stands right behind her and digs his hands into her shoulders. Do not be fooled. This is not a supportive boyfriend move. He's claiming territory. He's branding her in front of the wolves. Always pay attention to the hands. They tell you who really owns the room. It is a suffocating display of absolute dominance. Dominic looks at the terrified suits and announces that Aegis Capital is under new management, making Penelope the new chief financial officer. He literally tells them that a word from her is a word from him, daring anyone to leave if they have a problem. Silence. Nobody even breathes. But Trent just cannot help himself. His fragile ego overrides his survival instincts. He sneers at her, telling Dominic that she is just a junior auditor from a ruined firm, basically calling her a useless diversity hire. It is painful to watch a guy dig his own grave. Arrogance is usually just a cheap ersatz for massive insecurity. But in a room full of organized crime bosses, letting your pride talk instead of your brain is a completely fatal mistake. You can practically taste the poison in the air. Leo is by the door grinning like a shark, waiting for the blood to flow. Dominic's hands grip Penny's hand the Penny's shoulders so hard he is like a loaded gun ready to fire. But pause right here, look at what Penny does. She reaches up, touches his hand, and softly tells him to let her handle it. The hostage just became the attack dog. She plugs Ablet into huge projector screen and stares dead at Trent. With a terrifyingly calm voice, she suggests they look at his recent real estate deals, since he loves seasoned experience so much. A massive spreadsheet lights up the wall, and Trent's smug face instantly melts. The lesson? Never pick a fight with someone who has spent their entire life quietly memorizing the fine print while you were busy talking. You and I have probably both made the mistake of underestimating the quiet person in the room. Trent definitely did. Penny swipes her screen, showing how he bought 6 warehouses in New Jersey for $40 million. On paper, it looks fine, but the tax numbers were completely faked. She points out he used a shell company for the appraisal. Trent starts sweating, stammering that it is standard business. Then Penny drops the hammer. Her voice cracks like a whip as she reveals the company is registered to his own brother-in-law. He stole $12 million and hid offshore. The whole boardroom gasps. It is a beautiful disaster. If you are going to steal from a dangerous syndicate, maybe do not use a trick that a tired accountant can figure out before her morning coffee. Watch the other executives practically throw their chairs backward to get away from Trent. He is a dead man walking, and nobody wants his blood on their suits. Penny stands up, leaning over that mahogany table, exactly like a predator hunting its meal. She looks right through him, explaining he has been stealing $12 million from the deadliest family in New York with a scam a college freshman could beat. Trent is drenched in sweat now, looking at Dominic and begging, swearing Penny faked the numbers. Dominic does not even yell. He just calmly says his Leo's name, The giant enforcer steps up and yanks Trent out of his fancy chair by the collar. Life comes at you fast. 1 minute you are king of the boardroom. The next you are literally just garbage waiting for the disposal team. Leo laughs right in his face, telling Greg they are going for a ride to see what 12 million bucks can buy. Trent is screaming, dragging his nails down the doorframe as they haul him away until the hallway goes dead silent. And Penny? She sits back down, completely unfazed. She stares at the 19 men left in the room, and they are looking at her like she is a terrifying dark god. She folds her hands and calmly asks to discuss the new protocols. Behind her, Dominic leans in, his lips reaching her ear, and spews in whispered to remind him never to lie on his taxes. It is sick, but it is brilliant. They're cementing a massive trauma bond right before our eyes. The tragic reality is that when you start using violence ways to keep yourself safe, you will inevitably fall deeply in love with the sword. Right before Penny can process that next twisted, flirty threat, Dominic's private phone buzzes. You can see the shift happen instantly. That proud, possessive smile vanishes, and he turns into a block of lethal ice. He calls the meeting over, and those executives practically trample each other trying to escape. Once the room is empty, Dominic drops the bomb, the bank freeze, let his tech guys trace Sterling's network. Penny asks where he is, and Dominic calmly checks the massive gun hidden in his belt, saying Sterling is at a private hangar at Teterboro Airport. Just like that, the fake corporate mask hits the floor. It is a harsh reminder that no matter how many glass buildings or expensive units the beast of human nature never actually goes to sleep. It is always ready to hunt. Stick it with me here, because this is where everything flips. Dominic says Sterling is armed, trying to fly out of the country with the stolen hard drive. He turns to leave and orders Penny to stay put and lock the floor down. A boardroom is one thing, but a gunfight on an airport tarmac is complete chaos. But Penny does the unthinkable. She steps away the safe table and looks him in the eye. She tells him she is the only one who can wipe those codes, reminding him of their deal. "I go where you go," she says. Dominic just stares at her. The tragic irony is complete. The scary monster did not ruin the innocent girl. He just gave her the keys to her own darkness. She is no longer just a hostage surviving a bad situation. She has become a fully willing accomplice in the nightmare. Picture this. He does not even argue with her. He just holds out his hand, and Penny takes it, and stepping right off the cliff into the dark. We are watching them tear through the Lincoln Tunnel at over 80 miles per hour in a convoy of armored cars, sitting in this heavy, suffocating silence. In the back, Penny is balancing her laptop, her fingers flying like she is playing a piano. She knows Roland is sloppy, but not an idiot. He will avoid public Wi-Fi. She just needs him to ping a local network to trigger her kill switch. And here is a simple truth about life sometimes. Staring straight into a screen is the only way to avoid looking at the terror right in front of you. Hyperfocus is just fear wearing a mask. So, Dominic slams a fresh magazine into his custom pistol, the metallic click echoing in the heavy air. He looks at Penny, entirely dead behind the eyes, and orders her to stay put while he and Leo secure the hangar. Her job is to wipe the drive the second she gets a signal. The reality of what is about to happen settles right on her chest like an anvil. They roll up to hangar 4B right at 11:42 in the morning. Massive steel building, private jet screaming on the tarmac. But fate is a cruel writer, guys. Dominic is not the first one to the party. 2 black luxury cars are already parked there, doors flung wide open. Life lesson for today: no matter how fast you run, your past usually gets there 5 minutes before you do. Leo Tonks look at the open cars and instantly draws his gun. It is Moret's crew. Lorenzo's figured out the money fell through and decided to take the drive by force. Dominic does not even blink before ordering them to hit it. They do not hit the brakes. They smash right through the chain link gate and slam to a halt. Before the dust even settles, Dominic and his guys are out, using the heavy doors for cover. Automatic fire just rips the morning in half. Inside the car, Penny hits the floorboards, her heart practically beating out of her chest. And this is the part that really stings. The lesson here is that we spend our whole lives making tiny, seemingly harmless choices, only to wake up one day dodging bullets we practically loaded ourselves. Let us hit pause for a second and look at Penelope. She is a masterclass in trauma bonding. She glues her eyes to that laptop screen, desperately trying to nervous system into calming down by focusing on the math. She is hunting for a Bluetooth signal within 300 feet. Meanwhile, outside her little glass bubble, Dominic is moving like a ghost. He is not just some guy in a suit. He is the undisputed apex predator of the city. He puts 2 rounds into the chest of cartel enforcers without even a change in his breathing. Through the window, she spots Roland clutching a briefcase backed against some fuel drums. The sad reality of life is that the monsters we fear the most are usually the ones protecting us from everything else. Standing right over the shivering executive is Vincent, the muscle for the Moretti family. He presses the barrel of his gun directly into Roland's temple, screaming at him to hand over the drive over the deafening roar of the guns. Roland is completely losing it, crying about his bounced $15 million payment. And guys, this is where the tragedy writes itself. In a state of total blind panic, Roland opens his laptop just to check the files and accidentally connects to the plane's local Wi-Fi. Inside the car, Penny gasps. Her fingers hit the keys like lightning. She is in a pure state of survival mode now. It is a harsh truth to swallow. But panic will always make you hand the keys to your own destruction directly to your enemy. Penny hammers the override command, desperate to prove her the worth to the very man holding her captive. A progress bar pop up, eating the master directory alive. 12%, 34%. Out on the concrete, Vincent entirely loses his patience and violently pistol whips Roland. The silver case hits the floor, and the encrypted drive skitters out. Vincent grabs it with his bloody hands, screaming at his guys to fall back to the jet. 67%, 85%. Penny is begging the screen, completely locked in. Vincent turns to make his big escape, but steps right into Dominic. Dominic is just standing there, weapon leveled right at Vincent's face. The lesson? You can steal the prize, but you still have to pay the toll on the way out. You and I are going to unpack this together, because this exact second changes everything. The gunfire suddenly dies out as Dominic's guys completely surround the remaining men. Dominic tells Vincent to put it down, and his voice is flat, cold, the dead tone of a real sociopath. But Vincent just smirks, holding up that little hard drive like it is a magic shield, bragging that he holds the blueprint to ruin Dominic's life. Inside the truck, Penny's screen flashes a bright, beautiful green. The wipe is done. The hardware is basically melted. She knocks on the glass, giving Leo the thumbs up, and is a brutal little life lesson pride. Usually makes us brag about the cards we hold, completely blind to the fact that someone else just flipped the entire table. This slow, terrifying smile creeps onto Dominic's face. He asks Vincent if he is truly sure about that, his voice dropping to a whisper. Vincent glances down at his prize. The blue light blinks red, throws a tiny spark, and goes totally dark. Fried from the inside out. You can actually see Vincent's heart as he realizes his massive advantage just turned into a piece of useless plastic. Dominic stares right through him, tells him to let Lorenzo know the audit failed, and pulls the trigger. One shot. Vincent drops to the concrete. The rest of his guys immediately drop their weapons and surrender. Life teaches us this over and over. The exact moment you think you finally have the universe figured out is the moment it pulls the rug right out from under you. Down on the ground, Roland is holding his shattered jaw. He looks at the dead enforcer, the smoking drive, and Dominic slowly walking toward him. He starts scrambling backward into the fuel drums, crying and begging. He claims they threatened his family, swears up and down that he is loyal. Dominic just looks down at him like he is studying an insect. He tells Roland he is neither loyal nor intelligent, and without skipping a beat, orders Leo to throw him in the soundproof trunk. Roland is going to spend his hours explaining every stolen penny. Dominic must walks away, feeling absolutely nothing. It is a terrifying lesson in Poland will push you to your absolute breaking point, and then play the victim the second you actually push back. Let us take a really close look at this next part. Dominic walks over and yanks open the heavy door. Penny, shaking so violently, she has her hands balled into fists, just to hold herself together. But Dominic does not say a word. He just pulls her out of the seat and wraps her up in his arms, pressing his face into her hair. He smells like cheap Shane and fresh gunpowder. But Penny just clings to him, burying herself in the chest of the most dangerous man breathing. This is it. This is the exact second the trap shut on her heart. The storm fades out, and they head back to the Manhattan penthouse. Here is the messy truth about human nature when we are drowning in absolute chaos. We will hold on to the very anchor that is pulling us straight down into the deep. Penny stands totally still by the massive windows, staring out at the city. She traded her ruined jacket for an oversized cashmere sweater, trying to wrap herself in something soft, though she kept the formal trousers on. Barnaby the cat is rubbing against her ankles, completely oblivious to the fact that she just survived a mob war. She hears Dominic walk in behind her. He hands her a glass of 25-year-old scotch. He is showered, wearing dark clothes, looking so casually dominant it just crushes whatever emotional walls she has left. He tells her Roland is locked away and the rival family ran back to Chicago. It teaches you something funny about survival. The world can be burning to the ground outside, but inside, life just keeps demanding to be lived. Dominic is completely calm. He points out they just cost their enemies $15 million and their best street captain. They are completely untouchable now. Penny stares at her drink, desperately trying to anchor herself to normal business. She asks about their corporate acquisitions. Dominic coldly states the original Leo is dead, but they will use the cash to buy 3 clean shipping companies on the coast, no cartel ties, and he tells her she is going to write the proposals. Penny finally turns around and asks the million-dollar question. Why did he trust a complete stranger to restructure his empire and bring her into a war zone? Listen closely, because the deepest lesson in life is that trust is never given freely. It is forged in the fires of mutual destruction. Pause the movie right here, guys. Watch this beautifully toxic trap. Dominic takes the glass from Penelope's aching hand, framing her face with his massive palms to force a feeling of deep intimacy. My whole life, he whispers, dropping his mobster's armor. People just see the monster, the money, the violence, and honestly, it breaks your heart. He says she is the only one who ever faced down loaded guns just to save him. Her breath catches as he stares at her lips. She weakly claims she was just doing her job. He replies she was born for this. The lesson? Sometimes the people who finally recognize your true worth are the exact ones who plan to use it against you. Watch how this twisted emotional visual game plays out. He leans in, totally cutting her off from reality. She says she spent her whole life shrinking us down so worthless guys like Roland could feel big. I will never let you be invisible again, he promises. And this part really hits you right in the chest. Penelope tears up because she finally feels seen. She spent decades hiding her brains to fit in. Dominic does not just accept her broken pieces, he turns them into a dark religion. When she whispers that she belongs to him, the trap snaps shut. It is the ultimate trauma bond, and his eyes just flare with possessive fire. The life lesson here is simple. Never let a desperate need of validation blind you to a situation that is secretly designed to control you. And I belong to you, the light and the dark, Dominic replies, sealing their twisted fate. He swears she will run his empire while he destroys anyone in her way. Then he completely consumes her. The physical shift is desperate and overwhelming. Penelope grabs his hands, matching his wild energy with her own buried need for power. He presses her against the reinforced glass, his massive body blocking out the entire world. They are locking in a bond built on spilled blood and billions of dollars. Flash forward 6 months, and the movie flips the script on us. We are suddenly in a spotless corporate boardroom, looking at 30 of the sharpest financial minds around. The lesson? Power can change hands in the blink of an eye, but true control is always built in the shadows. The corporate scene completely the amic, no old school gangsters left. This is Penelope's new army, built to support her dark transformation. She stands at the head of the table, an absolute weapon in a custom emerald green suit. Tapping her pen on a file, her voice is completely freezing. The acquisition is finalized, and she answers. She confirms the assets are clean. The tax shelters are ironclad, and they are now the biggest legit company in the West. The room erupts in applause. Stick with me, because this is the real tragedy. She thinks she has won, but she has fully absorbed the darkness of her captor. The life lesson is tragic but true. The most unbreakable prisons are the ones we happily build for ourselves while believing we are completely free. The final frame of this movie tells you everything. Dominic sits in the seat of power, but he could not care less about the spreadsheets or the clapping suits. His dark eyes glued to Penelope. When his hand reaches under that marble table to grab her thigh, it is the ultimate silent power move from a control freak. But Penelope does not flinch. She just shoots him a wicked smirk before getting right back to running their massive empire. It is wild to watch. That terrified account we met at the start has mutated into an apex predator. She learned this scheme and took the green. The life lesson is twisted but very real. Sometimes the exact environment that was perfectly designed to break your spirit is the one that teaches you how to rule the game. Before the credits roll, do me a favor and hit that like button. I want to know how you guys realize this twisted dynamic. So drop a comment below. What was the exact moment that hooked you?
Was it Penelope snapping and breaking that god's nose? Or Dominic ruining Roland without a sweat? If you know someone who loves watching these toxic movie train wrecks,
send this video their way. Make sure you are subscribed with notifications on, because we are always analyzing the darkest cinematic minds. As we wrap up this review, remember our simple life lesson for today. No matter how crazy or dangerous your own stories gets, keeping a completely cool head and watching the room will always be your absolute best survival tactic. See you in the next ones.
Another meaningful lesson in the story is that intelligence does not always receive immediate recognition, especially when it comes from someone society tends to underestimate.
Penelope is a brilliant forensic accountant, but because of her appearance, position, and quiet personality, many people dismiss her. Colleagues give her difficult background work, but do not respect her voice. Roland assumes she is too meek to challenge him. The executives at Aegis Capital doubt her ability because she does not fit their image of a powerful financial leader. However, the story slowly proves that Penelope's intelligence is the most valuable weapon in the room. She reads financial data like a detective, notices tiny anomalies others ignore, uncovers hidden debts, freezes illegal funds, exposes internal theft, and protects an entire business empire. This teaches an important educational point. A talent can exist in overlooked places. A person's value should never be judged by appearance, job title, gender, body size, or social confidence. In education and professional life, people must learn to look deeper than surface impressions. Many students and employees may feel invisible because they are quiet, different, or not traditionally impressive. Penelope's journey reminds them that their skills matter even before others recognize them. It also teaches leaders an important lesson. Good leadership means listening to the person with evidence, not only the person with status. Dominic survives because he listens to Penelope Naphe instead of ignoring her like everyone else did. The story, therefore, encourages respect for expertise, careful thinking, and intellectual humility. It shows that real intelligence is not about arrogance or popularity, but about observation, discipline, and the courage to use knowledge responsibly.